This is Perino on Politics, where I call up my smart friends and find out what's on their minds about the state of American politics. Right now, it's Monday, July 14th, and President Trump is in the Oval Office right now announcing a new weapons package or plan deal for Ukraine, and he's making this announcement with the NATO Secretary General. I noticed that the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and Marco Rubio are sitting there as well. So, Matt, let me just start with that, because no matter how much a president wants to focus on American issues, and this president is, foreign policy issues are a part of the package, and these problems come to the president's desk. I think Biden really slow-walked the whole process. I've said this for a few years. He basically told the Ukrainians, here's half a weapon. See if you can defend yourselves. And okay, I'll give you like a little tiny bit more of a weapon and see if you can defend yourselves. Now we're 4 years later. President Trump gave Putin some time to try to come to a deal. And I think he realized he was being played. And so now we have this. Over to you.
No, you're right. I mean, foreign policy is one of the areas where a president has to react. Your old boss, George W. Bush, best of all, where you don't expect the problems, they just come to you.
Yeah.
And some of his biggest successes are on the foreign policy front. The Iran strikes, the Hamas, kind of dealing with Israel, supporting Israel in the face of Hamas, the Iran-Israel ceasefire, all of that, big successes. I thought it was interesting also how he's characterizing this, right? He's characterizing it as a major statement on Russia. I think, one of the things that Trump is masterful at is knowing exactly how to change the subject out of a situation where he doesn't want to talk about it. And characterizing it not just about Ukraine, but he knows that the mainstream media just is in love with how he talks about Russia, his relationship with Russia and Putin. So characterizing it in that regard, I think is really smart to try and turn the page on a week that he spent talking about Jeffrey Epstein that he didn't want to be. Or weekend, I should say. So I think that is a smart move on his part, and I don't think an accident.
And we will talk about the Epstein issue, and we'll touch on that in the second segment a little bit more. In the meantime, you do have yet another package that has to do with financing the government that's going through right now. And I think a lot of people that listen to this might say, well, we just did the big, beautiful bill, and that was a big issue, and then that got done. But now there's this rescissions package, and it's in question whether it will actually pass. So in your best, tell it like I'm your sister who never read anything about Washington, what is a rescissions package and why would there be a holdup?
So everybody talked about DOGE and what Elon did in the early part of the administration, right? He cut a bunch of spending. The problem is to actually really cut it. He has to actually have Congress claw it back, because Congress, not the president, is the one who appropriates all the money for the government to spend. So for it to be actually official, it doesn't matter what Elon puts in a press release, doesn't matter what he says, it's great, but for it to be official, Congress actually has to claw the money back. So a rescissions package is officially kind of saying, hey, we don't want to spend this money, we're going to take it back, put it back in the Treasury, and really kind of finalizing it. And I think that is the long and short of it. Now, the devil's in the details, but it wasn't as easy as Elon just putting out on X that we're doing this or we're doing that.
That's why I was sort of frustrated with all of the DOGE reporting early on. And there was like irrational exuberance about DOGE. I'm like, but actually, this is actually, the money is still there. And some members of Congress, like Susan Collins of Maine, who has principles and also an election coming up, is maybe thinking this isn't a great deal?
I mean, look, there's two sides of this, right? And I don't think it's any secret. Her big issue is PEPFAR, right? The George W. Bush's big program, very successful program, combating AIDS in Africa. Susan is one of the few members, I hate to say this, for the senators, not a ton left anymore, that served from the entire Bush administration. And so she remembers that program well. She knows the good it can do. She's also probably one of the more at-risk Republican incumbents in the Senate. I think she'll be fine. She was great in 2020.
And is she at risk from another Republican or a Democrat?
Democrat. The White House plays very, very smart with Susan Collins. They know it's going to be extremely hard to get a Republican in Maine if she ever leaves or wherever. So they let her have a very wide berth with her as opposed to somebody else who's in a very deep red state. So they play it very smart with her. And so, and she's also chair of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. So she has a very big role regardless. So she will get, I think, a lot of what she wants on this. and they will pass it with her assent and kind of craft it around what she wants or doesn't want.
And then and it's only like how big is the rescissions bill? Is it 9 billion?
Something, there's
I mean,
9 billion.
It's really sad to say. It's not even a decimal point.
And I think what the problem
budget
is you had Elon going around right after the election saying it's $2 trillion. And then I was in the room when the first time he said it's going to be around $1 trillion. And I kind of looked around. I'm like, wait a minute, this seems like a change. And
from $2 trillion to $1 trillion.
$1 trillion, and I was trying to text people, being like, and they're like, it's fine. And now we're looking at $9 billion. Which, look, I think they're going to try and keep doing these rescissions packages. This, I think, is the first one.
Oh, you can do more than one.
They can do more than one.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So they're going to think of it like almost like what they do is like the CRAs. So it's a series of them, and they'll just keep doing them until they can't do them anymore, or there's not enough to get 50 votes. So this is the first one.
Oh, okay.
That
actually makes a little bit more sense to me now. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, aside from that, and the things we're going to talk about in the second block, the other thing that's, as I could tell over the weekend, talking to some friends and checking in here and there, is that the thing in Washington that's on people's minds is the 2026 midterms. Now that the big, beautiful bill is behind everybody, and the president signed it, and they've got, they'll deal with that and trying to sell that to the American public as the great thing. How do you think the Republicans and Democrats feel going into the 2026 midterms?
I think whether you see the big, beautiful bill, rescissions, on our side, it's about awakening our base and getting them, not feeling complacent, not feeling like the job is done, Trump's in office, popular vote. Like, one of the earmarks, the hallmarks of the Trump era is that the Dems have done a much better job in off-year elections than Republicans. It used to be the opposite during the Obama years. We'd show out on midterm elections. Now it's them doing better, right? You see it in random special elections too throughout the course of the years. So we need a case to make to the base why they need to come out, right? We've cut the spending that you wanted so badly, that we promised we would.
Yeah, even $9 billion.
I know. No, that's a tough part, right?
That's not a lot.
You need more. You need the big, beautiful bill. So look, the Democrats talked, big about how it was going to really change the game in the midterms. The point of it was, in my opinion, was to make sure that the base was tuned in. The Democrats were going to come out regardless. We've seen that consistently in the Trump era and this year alone. We needed a reason for the Republicans and the conservatives and the MAGA base to come out.
Okay, and so let's just set the stage for everybody here. It's July 14th, and the midterms are November of 2026. So the House right now is a razor-thin margin of Republican majority, and the Senate is slightly more comfortable for Republicans. You're thinking right now, because historically speaking, the pattern usually is whoever is in power in the House would lose that power. But it seems to me that House Republicans are in pretty good shape. Am I wrong?
I mean, Mike Johnson gets consistently underestimated and overperforms.
He's the Speaker.
I will say that. Mm-hmm. He's the Speaker of the House, right? I will say this, and this even changed from when I was running comms at the NRCC in 2018, and much more since, say, 2010, when the Republicans took back the House for the first time in quite a while. There's not a huge playing field anymore. You're fighting over a handful of seats, maybe a couple handfuls of seats. It's not this massive 100-seat, 80-seat playing field like there was 20 years ago. I would also look at, there are some red states like Texas where on the state level, Republicans want to make some redistricting moves to try and create more red seats and enlarge that margin a bit.
Do you think that Republicans will be able to keep the Senate?
Yes. If we are not keeping the Senate, the House is long gone, and we're in some deep stuff.
I sent you a story yesterday, just as we were thinking about what we're going to talk about today, and it's a news analysis piece by Peter Baker, and he's a longtime reporter out of Washington, D.C. Right now, he works for the New York Times. When I first met him, he was at the Washington Post. And he has this long story about how President Trump wants to make things in America look like and feel like and be as it was in his youth. Okay, now, I'm not saying that's what President Trump wants, but philosophically, it is interesting as somebody who is conservative. I do like tradition, But I also like modernization and excitement and innovation, and I think you can have both. I think Peter in the article was describing a Trump as he sees him, fine, whatever. But the progressives, as Peter Baker was talking about them, that they are the ones that want to move forward, move fast. Let's do great, big new things. And right now, the biggest progressive on the scene is this mayor's race candidate in New York City, Zohran Mamdani, partly because there's nobody else stepping up to the leadership role in the Democratic Party. And I just wanted to talk about those two philosophical things because in some ways it's frustrating to me to be covering these stories that are looking backwards, like the Biden auto pen story and the Epstein story. So we could talk about all of that. Maybe let's start with why you think the auto pen story and Joe Biden is relevant and an important one, and that there's some legs there, if you think there is.
I think there is. I think there is. And I think the New York Times story last night really added a lot more legs.
Oh, can you
to
explain to people what happened? Sure. I didn't.
So the New York Times popped a story last night that Biden actually talked to them. He never talked to them once during the 4 years he was president, but they felt.
Is that right? They never ever got an interview? Wow.
I know. It's like the home team. You're not really, but whatever, regardless.
Actually, no, the Democrats hate the New York Times.
Well, they feel betrayed often by them, right? It's like it's a weird, yeah. Well, I could spend a whole lot of time talking about that, but yeah. And so it's essentially, Republicans were trying to say that Biden signed a bunch of pardons or did a bunch of official actions with the auto pen, and was he aware of these things? Were they not? And the reporting came out from
the auto pen with the pardons, do they count if he wasn't going person by person? Because apparently he said, well, I just knew the category that I wanted to pardon and verbally approved all of those.
And even like there was delineation, he verbally approved the high profile ones like Mark Milley. But what does that mean? He could say he verbally approved them all now if he wanted to, but did he actually, right? And I left reading that story that there's a lot more questions about whether or not he saw the final list of the pardons. He actually signed off on them name by name. I don't think so, based on how that reporting characterizes it. He had general conversations about some of the people, and then the staff was dispatched to handle it at a tactical level, which, again, you can make a very good argument that that's not at all what should be done on pardons.
Right.
It's the hand of the president. So there is legs on that. And look, I think the mainstream media in many ways wants this to just go away. It'll bubble up on occasion. The great book that Alex Thompson and Jake Tapper did that really dived into this, but it bubbled up and they just kind of want to cast it aside. And so I think that is something that has a real
not only that, but I think that the last thing the Democrats really want is for Joe Biden to be coming back out and being very visible and being like, oh, hey, let me raise my hand and try to explain this. If you read the transcript of Biden's interview, it's like, wow, what's this guy talking about?
Oh, and they made sure to put in his pauses and halting.
Yeah, they did. They didn't do him a favor there.
And about that.
I still think that the most important person to hear from is Jeff Zients. Yes. He was the chief of staff to Biden. He was very, very low profile chief of staff. I mean, kind of like Susie Wiles is for Trump. I think actually Susie Wiles has done a couple more interviews than Zients ever did. But Zients was there in the room with the president at all times. So all of these questions to me, first of all, number one person of responsibility is Joe Biden. Number two, the chief of staff. Yeah. Or maybe Jill Biden. But really, actually, in terms of who's responsible in terms of the government, it would be the chief of staff.
Agreed. And unlike, I think, Susie Wiles, Jeff Zients, there's questions about Jeff Zients' efficacy. He's not Mike Donilon or any of the longtime Biden aides. He was kind of there.
Yeah.
No one questions Susie Wiles is a part of the decision-making process and a big one in the Trump White House at all. And I think also there's a difference between telling the New York Times something and saying it under oath to Congress, right? I think there's a big delineation there.
So that investigation is underway, and we'll see if James Comer, the House Republican, can continue to bring up these former White House folks and get them to testify. One thing that happened is that there's usually, for many, many years, even when I was there, the previous administration would typically concede and grant executive privilege to whoever it was in the administration before them. That did not happen with Biden. They did not give executive privilege to the 2016 term of the Trump officials. And so now the Trump people are not giving the Biden White House officials executive privilege. So once again, the Democrats learn that turnabout is fair play. They always seem to forget that. There's a lot of internal fighting within the Republican circles, or maybe even MAGA circles. It feels very online to me. I do think I am a little bit underestimating how big a deal this is in that world. I kind of looked at it this weekend, and I always think about how, something like 70% of third graders can't read at their grade level.
Yeah.
And we have so many bigger issues to deal with, but this one is sticky.
It is, and it's a weird combination of, yes, it is.
We should explain what happened, just so people, in case anybody had a great weekend and wasn't paying attention to the news.
Basically, it came out on Friday that there's this big fight or alleged fight between Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and Dan Bongino, the Deputy FBI Director, over whether or not, the handling of this Epstein, whether there's a client list, whether there's not. Pam Bondi at certain times said there was, and it was on her desk. And then they come out later and said there isn't. They dumped a bunch of files shortly after July 4th. And I think it's one of the rare combinations of it being both. It is an online thing, but it's also the Epstein scandal and case is something that regular people know the contours of broadly. So it can translate both ways. And I think two things. Number one, the mainstream media loves it when conservatives fight.
Oh, yeah.
Every
nothing better, right?
To keep that going and stoking it and playing it all up. And and I think in this case, conservatives are playing into that. We're doing the job for them. And I think it's tough timing because Trump is coming off probably the best 3-4 weeks he's had, and I think either term as president, starting with the Iran strikes and up to the big, beautiful bill signing. And so what we're seeing now, and I remember this classic
and also the
example,
Supreme Court wins.
Court wins, great economic news, gas prices, inflation, etc. Yep. You're absolutely right. Trump is very good. I remember vividly, he lost the Iowa caucuses in 2016. People forget that he did. The day after, he comes out the next day and says that Ted Cruz was born in Canada, right? Not true, but he just said it. And everyone starts asking. It became a massive story. And I think what we're seeing a little bit here with Rosie O'Donnell, the citizenship thing, the major statement on Russia, the Mexico tariffs, it's flooding the zone to try and just get this off the front page and get it to simmer down. As I understand it, the Daily Wire is reporting that J.D. Vance is trying to talk between Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino, smooth it all out.
That's a good role for him.
A very great role.
Yeah.
He has credibility on both sides. Look, there's no reason. I mean, every administration, unfortunately, deals with this sort of drama, but the longer it goes on, the bigger distraction it becomes.
So what about more broadly on this question about conservatives looking backwards and progressive looking forwards? How do you think about that?
I think Baker has his own thought on it. If you read the story, for example, he mentions bringing back plastic straws. I think that's actually a great thing. I don't understand why that's some cultural touchstone, but that's just me. I think that for too long, conservatives' job was to slow down the liberals. I think with Trump's election and the way he's governing, it is another sort of revolution. It is a pushing back and undoing a lot of what they did wrongly, I think, on whether that's DEI and the political correctness. And there's a host of things. But it gave us, I think, something proactive that we had been searching for, to kind of go after. And, all Republicans, all conservatives can talk about, one thing we all agree on, cutting taxes and killing terrorists, but what's something we can go after them on and get the Democrats retreating? And I think, again, DEI, biological men playing women's sports, that sort of thing is something that I think we can talk about and win on.
Yeah. I'll just make a last point here before we take a quick break. And that is this mayor's race in New York. The reason I bring it up is not because I love to talk about New York when I know that most of my listeners aren't even in this city. It's because I do think it's a harbinger of things to come across the country. These younger, very online, very hip, very liberal, very progressive, very woke people are starting to run for office. And they have figured out a way to find a lane, communicate in ways that younger people are utilizing, whether it be however you get your news online. But he's also got a message about the economy. And I disagree with the message, but at least he's talking about it. He's talking about freezing rent in New York City. And of course, that's absurd to me from a policy perspective. It will never work. It's terrible. It's awful. But then I look at the opponents to Mamdani in the New York City's mayor's race. They're fighting amongst themselves as to who should drop out when they're running second to him in November. Nobody is saying, you know what, instead of freezing rents, here's what we're going to do. La, 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 la. Like nothing. And I start to look at this going, guys, this is happening across the country. I can just feel it coming. I've got a gut instinct about it, and I'm concerned.
On a process level, the way you described it reminds me of the spring of 2016 when all the other guys were talking about, hey, you got to drop out. You got to stop. You know, who's
going to stop Trump? I'm like, okay,
obviously it's
that
totally
obviously didn't work. And now, like
ideologically.
Mamdani, I'm like, guys. Meantime, my assistant, TikTok Kate, this weekend saw this guy. He's 79 years old. He came to America in 1982 legally from Ukraine, and he and his dad had a shoe repair and watch repair shop in the West Village. And apparently he's been paying $4,000 a month in rent. Then the landlord tried to get him to get out of his lease, etc. He was able to keep his lease, but they raised his rent to $7,500, and he can't afford it. So the reason Kate even knew about this is she ran into him on a walk on Sunday, and now he's doing this repair work out of his car. There's like a little sign that says Dave's Repair for shoes and watches. So out of his car on Sundays. He's 79 years old, and she was very concerned for him as a person. And what I took away from it was that, so who outside of Mamdani is talking about this? And there's no one. And I just feel like this is going to start going across America. Now, the best thing President Trump could have happen for him, for Republicans, is for the economy to do really well, for these energy costs to continue to go down, for the investment in AI and energy to be really exciting and new and innovative. And then on the regulation front, figuring out a way to work with governors and city governments. I'm looking at this view of the city right here. How can we build more housing? Like, what's happening? Because if conservatives don't start really doing that and thinking beyond President Trump, that's he's got 3.5 more years of a presidency. But in the big scheme of things, if Mamdani and all of his people are coming up behind you, you better do something.
Yeah. I mean, so many big blue cities, Chicago, like,
LA's a disaster.
Disaster. They're touching the stove with all these, socialists or effectively socialist candidates. And, Brandon Johnson has like a approval rating of like 7%, and so it kind of will go into what we talk about coming up. But Trump and city politics. Look, he knows New York City, but he also knows city politics, right? Being a developer in New York City throughout how many decades. That is something I'm very interested to see him deal with.
I joke that after he finishes his 2 terms as president, he's going to have to come back and run for mayor of New York.
He would love it. He would love it.
Maybe we'll see. Okay, hey, there, you heard it here first. Matt Gorman, what are you paying attention to? What am I missing?
Kind of similar to what we just talked about, how Trump deals with Washington, D.C. He made 2 unnoticed appointments to what's called the National Capital Planning Commission.
Okay.
2 of his closest aides, Will Scharf and James Blair, great guys.
Oh.
And they started kind of really going after these new proposed renovations to the Federal Reserve Building as basically a warning shot to Jerome Powell, saying it's too opulent, it's way over budget, it's this, it's that. Now, these are commissions that are so obscure no one would even know anything about it. But I think between that, and I'm also watching to see if he gets involved at all with the Commander Stadium, which the D.C. City Council does not want to pass or is really dragging their feet on.
Oh, I thought the council wanted the new Commander Stadium.
They need more votes, and so I think they're holding out a little bit, and they need it approved by the 15th to start construction, as we sit here today. The council's like, well, maybe talk about it in the fall. So I'm curious to see how Trump uses his leverage, including some funding that they took out of D.C. to incentivize either the Federal Reserve Building or the Commander Stadium. So city politics meets Donald Trump.
Oh, that's fun. Well, and also, Judge Jeanine, who's now the
Yes.
district attorney for the U.S. Capitol. I think she's at the right place at the right time. She's got the criminals on her mind, and they better look out.
Oh, I love it. We need it in D.C.